regarding your stance against Israeli policies in general. Now, I'm assuming you base it on ethics, you base it on morality, but I've looked at your profile and I've looked where you put that map of Israel, and you have this radar of where it could reach. When Israel is not a threat, Iran is a threat. If you're basing it on ethics, where is your outcry against gender apartheid in Gaza by Hamas when the marathon was cancelled because women weren't allowed? In the West Bank, where Mahmoud Abbas said that he wants a Judenrein state, and yet we have Israel, which is not apartheid at all. I mean, look at the national team, the Arabs, MasterChef, they had the second place was an Arab Muslima. I mean, I didn't just pull out.
You know the one the song comes.
Listen, I didn't just pull out the back of the falafel truck yesterday. I've done my research, extensive research, for years, and I can tell you that the terrorism, state terrorism, is coming from Iran. And this gentleman mentioned Lebanon. Israel doesn't want to war with Lebanon. It started because the rockets from the Palestinians, from Hezbollah. I mean, come on, what is this nonsense?
Have you found an Arab member of the kibbutz? Member?
What?
In your research?
You have found Edmonds and Druze in the army. We talking about.
Do the research.
No, I've done research.
Do the research.
Nuts.
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, first of all, part of what I'm trying to do is to reframe the whole issue of war and so on. So in a way, where you're coming from, besides the pro-Israel part, is where a lot of military people. Like I said, I was in the library for a couple days of the strategic studies thing. There's a lot of material on terrorism and counterinsurgency and military, and in a way, it's very flat because there's no critical analysis. They're taking everything at face value. There is terrorism. So if there's terrorism, then you have to be counterterrorism. In other words, you deproblematize everything. And now the question is, how do we fight terrorism? There's no question about what do we mean by terrorism? Or is that, and one of the things that Mark, I have no trouble with his name, Neocleus in Brunel is trying to say in the anti-security stuff, is that our very language has to be changed. Because when you talk about security, that's a code word. It's a code word. Because what is security? Security for who? Who's security? And security can be, it's a kind of a term that hides a lot of things, security. I mean, G4S is a security firm, but so that part of what I'm trying to do is to develop a vocabulary and work with people that have done that, like the anti-security people that say if you talk about pacification and not security, all of a sudden the same thing you're talking about, we can be talking about a counterinsurgency campaign. But if you look at that same campaign through the lens of security or through the lens of pacification, if you look at your police force through those different lenses, a whole different picture comes out. So what I'm trying to do, and that's where it's true, the theory is, we have to work on it, but to make the connections, but what I'm trying to say is the whole war against terrorism isn't really a war against terrorism. What is it really? And that's where you get into, who's it serving? What companies are selling weapons? How is it, for example, allowing, like the Patriot Act and acts here, how is it allowing the government to control our lives more under the name of security? It doesn't deny that there's attacks, but the question is, how do you take the attacks and make them into something using the term security that has no end? So in the end, the safest country in the history of the world was probably the Soviet Union. Because in a totalitarian state, you don't really have crime or terrorism because everybody's controlled. So the question is, whose interests are being served? And what do we really mean? And that's why the terms are so important. So when you say terrorism as if it's a fact, that's very problematic. One reason being, for example, that terrorism as a term is always used for non-state actors. You never call a state terrorist.
We do call Iran a state-sponsored
But
terrorism.
wait, but no, but for example-
State-sponsored.
Yes, it is, and it is a terrorist thing.
No, but you see, but the point is, look, Israel has, what's it, now, I won't get into the whole, there's no international definition of terrorism.
Have you been filming all
But-
evening?
It doesn't matter.
Filming, recording, they recorded everything.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter.
Did you ask for permission?
It doesn't matter.
Oh, you did ask for permission, yeah?
It doesn't matter.
No, in that case, ask to my knowledge.
Well, it doesn't matter.
The guy in the back.